Schumacher and Mika Hakkinen have won on that. But John, it's a great weekend to look forward to, isn't it? The whole atmosphere at Indianapolis is so special.
Well, in fact, racing Grand Prix cars in North America, I think, is fantastic. And I remember going back, all the way back to 1974 to my first Grand Prix in North America at Watkins Glen. Without doubt, one of the finest road race courses in the world, and now used pretty much exclusively for NASCAR and for other forms of sports car racing. But here at Indianapolis, totally different racetrack, dominated by that very long 1,822 metre long straight. It's it combines turns 11, 12, 13. Those are slightly banked, and then down at the very, very wide entry into turn 1. That's where we expect to see a lot of overtaking, where cars can literally fan out on either side. They can go the long way around the outside, or they can dive up the inside and try and make a place. Great part of the racetrack to watch. The rest of the racetrack, well, maybe let's say a little bit on the slower side. We could do maybe a little bit of a faster quarter somewhere in the infield, but nevertheless a racetrack which I've predicted will not see an automatic Ferrari 1-2 as we've pretty much seen throughout the year. And in fact we could easily see a victory from one of the two Michelin teams, principally the Williams BMW team, but never ever discount McLaren. Remember, they won this Grand Prix last year, Mika Hakkinen's final Grand Prix victory. He just decimated the field after Barrichello blew up, but nevertheless it was a very, very strong finish from Mika Hakkinen. The only caveat, Ben, when McLaren won that race with Hakkinen and Mercedes-Benz last year, they were on the Bridgestone tyre.
Very true, yes, and of course he was pretty fired up, having been moved back on the grid after making a little error in the warm-up, going out on a red flag. So cars getting ready to come out on this rather damp day at Indianapolis, but in the meanwhile, Bruce Jones has just been speaking to Heinz-Harald Frentzen.
A Renter fan in the crowd has just spotted you. Good to have you back. Now tell me, how do you fit in the car? Obviously the car is made for smaller people than you.
Just okay. I mean, it's a little bit tight. The steering wheel is a little bit too close to me, but the seat and that is not too bad, actually. It was good enough to make a decision to race here.
But would you have made the same decision if you were going to Monaco, where it's turning the whole time?
Actually, we'll see. I mean, it would be probably a different issue, yeah. But I think it's okay. I mean, the Silverstone was all right.
Okay, let's hope you don't get too bruised. Thanks, Heinz-Harald.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, it'll be fun to see how Heinz-Harald Frentzen gets on this weekend in the Sauber, and the American fans looking for this opportunity to see Formula One cars in action. Olivier Panis in the BAR Honda. We've seen Jacques Villeneuve just saying hello to all the team members this weekend, former winner of the Indy 500, but he'd love to get a decent result in this US Grand Prix this year.
Yes, and Jacques Villeneuve in some of the press interviews prior to this Grand Prix suggesting that if his Formula One car was set up for the Indy, the oval circuit, he reckons it would lap even quicker than the IRL cars that race here in that fabled Indy 500. As Ross Brawn looking a lot better 2 weeks on from the pain of a back problem which kept him away from the circuit on Friday for the Italian Grand Prix. No doubt Ross joined in those celebrations that followed such a dominant performance by Rubens Barrichello and Michael Schumacher. Shame, Ben, they weren't actually allowed to race in that final sector of the race rather than holding station. You know, at this stage of the season, both championships are tied up. Basically, there's nothing anybody can do, and I think a lot of goodwill and a good PR would have been earned had Ferrari allowed Michael to race Rubens during those final 15-20 laps.
Well, Michael has been quoted as saying that it will be a race between them this weekend, that Barrichello is pretty safe now in second place. It's not completely wrapped up, but he doesn't need many points to put it completely out of the question that anybody can beat him to second in the championship. So Michael Schumacher says that no team orders will exist this weekend. We'll have to wait and see. I'm sure qualifying certainly will be no holds barred, and we've enjoyed some good battles this year in qualifying between Michael and Rubens, and it could well be the same story in the race. Cars now just making their way down the pit lane here at Indianapolis. Good response from the fans, from the crowd. You can see a little bit of dampness still on the pit lane exit.
Yes, and a very good response from the teams. Cars going out on track at the minute the pit lane is open, unlike other occasions where we just watch Renault going out with a set of wet tyres on. They're not going to waste any of the 3 sets they have available there. Just at pit lane exit, and one of the little dips in the track, you can see there's still standing water, but the track looks, I must say, pretty much in reasonable condition, and I would expect to see teams getting down to a competitive time relatively quickly, if you bear in mind that last year's pole position by Michael Schumacher was 1 minute 11.7. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in these 2 one-hour free practice sessions on Friday here in Indianapolis.
One thing we did learn at the first Grand Prix held here in 2000 was the fact that the infield takes a lot longer to dry off than the outer part, the banking and the main straight. That dried off very quickly when there was rain on race day itself, and it was the infield section that took quite a while to dry off. Some people changed tyres a little too early. And it's just worth looking now. He's on that infield section to see how damp it is.
Yes, it's... I think the conditions here now, right now as we're watching these live pictures coming in, much better than they were 2 years ago.
Yes, it looks as though we've got pretty much a dry line throughout. You can see puddles on the outside there, but I don't think it's going to take too long for them to have a decent dry run on this infield section. Just making his way along towards the final sort of last twisty section, turns 8, 9 and 10 coming up, series of hairpins here.
Yeah, it's just turning into turn 8 there at the exit of 8 going into 9. 9 is still damp, you can see that clearly, so that's going to be a problem for traction control, just using it pretty much to the maximum again. Out of 10, then the sprint down to 11. This is where we get on to the actual speedway part of the circuit again, and there you can see coming out of 11 then through 12, that'll be flat out no problem whatsoever, even in that slightly mixed damp track conditions, as the cars, some of them are going to, they're all going to dive back into the pits just for that installation lap. A little bit of dampness just with the blend of the banking joins the flat sort of the infield part of the circuit.
So Eddie Irvine, star of Monza, 3rd place for him and for the Jaguar team. And as we've heard from Niki Lauda, what a great boost in the motivation for the whole team that has been. Now also with the news from Ford that they're backing this programme. Again, continuing their backing of this programme, looking forward to greater success next year. It's a good time for Jaguar at the moment, and Eddie will be hoping to make the most of the improvement in performance here this weekend. It is a different setup required. They tend to run a fair amount of downforce around this track, even though they've got such a long section of track where they're flat out on the power. Let's just ride with Eddie. We'll expect him to come in to the pits, as we've seen everyone else do so far. And let's just watch him now. This is where he would join the oval, the bowl up on the outside. You can see the grandstands, but he stays tight to the inside and he comes back into the pit lane just as everybody else has done.
Yeah, it's just the apron of the speedway. So you see this is the long entry into the pit lane. And Eddie Irvine just makes his way in fairly leisurely. There will be a line at which he has to get. There it is. That's the line at which he will get down to the required speed limit in the pit lane today. Tomorrow, of course, it rises on Sunday for the Grand Prix.
Well, the winners at this Grand Prix the last 2 years, Michael Schumacher won on the first running of the Grand Prix here in 2000. Mika Hakkinen won last year for McLaren. It turned out to be his last ever Grand Prix win, of course, but McLaren should be in good spirits coming here. Bruce Jones has caught up with Martin Whitmarsh.
Martin Whitmarsh, there was word at the last Grand Prix in Monza that the McLarens that would roll out here at Indianapolis would have a whole new rear end on the car. Is that true?
No, that's not true, but we've been working on the car in Barcelona. We've found some things that make the car go quicker. We've got them on the car. I wouldn't disclose to you and others what that is, of course, but certainly Kimi, who's had more experience of some of these new parts, is quite bullish about it. So hopefully we'll find out when we get out there.
Now, obviously a circuit with a very long straight here and a long back straight. It seems the Mercedes engine has been producing bit by bit more horsepower this season. How confident are you for this weekend?
I don't think we're confident at the moment. The only people who are confident are Ferrari when you come to these races. But, you know, we've had a good record here. We should have won it the first year. We did win it the second year. So it's a difficult circuit because it's got a very tight infield. It's got a very long straight. But, you know, that makes it quite challenging. We'll see between ourselves, Mercedes, and, of course, Michelin. We'll see if we can do a decent job here this year.
Session's just about to start. We'll soon find out. Thanks very much, Martin.
Okay, thanks.
So that interview made just a few minutes ago, just before cars went out on track. And as he says, it's been a good place for McLaren. Of course, Bruce McLaren himself was the winner of the first ever United States Grand Prix, which was held at Sebring back in 1959.
Indeed it was. Then it was followed in 1960 at another California circuit called Riverside. I mean, the Grand Prix have been held in California at Long Beach, and that was in the late 70s and early 80s, but of course Riverside was the scene for only one of the US Grand Prix. But Bruce McLaren I think still the youngest man to win a Formula 1 World Championship Grand Prix.
Well, World Championships all been about Ferrari this year, of course, and the architect behind much of that success has been Ross Brawn. Bruce Jones has been speaking to him.
Wet enough for intermediates, you think, or is it too dry already?
Ross Brawn sitting here, the first few cars just starting to go out. What are you expecting from this session? A lot of wind down the start-finish straight.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to learn a lot, to be frank. Certainly not this morning. Track's still damp in places, and we just want to see how other people run, see whether we can run intermediates, or whether we can go on to the tyres. But it's going to be a difficult session from the point of view of drawing any conclusions. We'll do some running because we like to get into things, but I don't think we'll be making any fundamental decisions this morning.
Now, how easy is it to carry data from the previous year? Because every year we see that, particularly this year, the tyres are so much better, and the cars too, they're going so much faster. We've seen sort of 2-3 seconds coming off lap times. How much can you bring from last year?
Quite a lot. I think all the chassis data is relevant. I mean, obviously we've got the experience of other tracks between last year and this year, so we know the corrections to make. What we don't know really are the tyres. The tyres are much more difficult to judge. I mean, we have two new compounds here this weekend. Compounds we haven't run here before, so they're a little bit of an unknown. So that's where we've got to do some investigation. But the chassis data, ride heights, straight line speed, downforce levels, they're all pretty relevant from last year.
Now, Rubens is sitting 17 points clear of the driver in third place. So the gloves off this weekend. They can both, he and Michael, allowed to race for it?
Yes, I mean, within reason. And we don't want the two drivers falling out. I've said this before, that for us, the spirit of the team is very, very important. And we've seen situations in history where two drivers have fallen out and split the team, and we're not going to let that happen. So the drivers are free to race each other within limits and don't cause any friction within the team.
We'll watch. Thanks, Ross.
Well, it gives us something to look forward to if the two of them are truly allowed to battle. Now, looking at the Michelin tyre engineers, and I do believe, Peter, you've got some information on what Michelin have brought this weekend to Indianapolis, particularly with regard to their intermediate tyres.
That's right, Ben. Yes, interesting to hear Ross talking about a little bit of testing of the intermediates in these conditions. David Coulthard went out on a set of Michelin tyres that I personally have not seen before. It looked like a very, very shallow gauge wet tyre, much shallower than we normally see, which approximates a new type of intermediate for Michelin, I'd have to guess. We don't know yet what those are inside those covers. Obviously, we'll see when he goes out again. Kimi Räikkönen went out on dry tyres, but a lot of the Michelin runners were on that new shallow groove wet, and an interesting looking tyre it was too. So we'll follow that up and hopefully get some close-ups of the grooves a bit later on in the weekend.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch the battle continue between Bridgestone and Michelin. Weather forecast I saw was for a bit of dampness today, but for it generally improving a little bit over the weekend.
Andy, there's no point in overtaking on wets. Well, I never do. I mean, you can now you're there, but 10-4, Jock,
The work going
we
on.
were just having that discussion, Jack. We may as well while we're there, but we would do it. The figure you'll get will be on slicks.
He's obviously going out on wets as we look at Mika Salo now, the Toyota.
Yes, and he looks like he's on a fairly wet set of Michelin tyres. There's that bit of standing water just as they come around turn 9. That's not really going to be the reason why they want to be in wets. It's just that they're saving tyres and they're not going to do an awful lot until they feel that track conditions are slightly better. Nevertheless, they're here to go and do a bit of work. There are fans here in the grandstands, and they want to see cars on track. They didn't pay their money to come and see them sitting in their garages. So Mika Salo just decides he's coming back into the garages. He's done the fastest sector time in Sector 2, quite reasonably so. He's about the only car been out. He's done a run, let's say, through any of those sectors.
Using that experimental blue flashing light that's been tried a couple of times this year by a variety of teams, the FIA experimenting with that, perhaps providing greater visibility in damp and murky conditions. And so one or two teams we've seen that with so far this year. So Mika Salo pushed back in. Just remember that Toyota, of course, have never tested here at Indianapolis, never run their cars here. It's one of the few tracks that they were not able to run in their testing program throughout last year. So they've got quite a lot of learning to do. Interesting little element they've got on the rear wing. So obviously experimenting a little bit with their aerodynamics for this place.
Yes, you've got the difficulty of this very, very long straight. It effectively, as I say, combines 3 corners, but it's considered to be a straight. And you're getting up to speeds In qualifying, expect speeds up to about 220 miles an hour. In the race, maybe a few miles an hour slower. And then you've got a really relatively slow infield. Once you get through turns 3 and into 4, 5, 6, those are quite low speed corners. Then you have a bit of a sprint down the back straight. And then turns 9 and 10 in particular are very, very slow turns. And consequently, you've got this balance between high speed, lack of drag, low speed downforce.
I didn't hear anything but...
Talking a little bit about bit of a pause there from Mika Salo. Bit of setup changes going on as we now look at Jarno Trulli, and the Italian who had such a good result last time out in Monza. A bit of a surprise result perhaps, with both Renaults finishing in the top 6, 4th place for Jarno Trulli, and a very important collection of points for Renault. And Renault hoping that this race and the next one at Suzuka will help them in the end of the championship. Let's just quickly look and see what happened at Trulli. Did he get into a bit of a slide on these slippery conditions? Well, yes he did, but he sorted it all out. Meanwhile, Nick Damon is talking to technical boss there, Pat Simmons.
Pat Simmons, is Indianapolis one of the hardest tracks to set a car up for, with its two sort of diverse elements?
Yeah, it's different. I wouldn't necessarily say it's hard to set the car up. One of the things you're always looking at is the compromise of downforce. Do you want the speed on the straight? Do you want the grip in the infield section? And funnily enough, here at Indianapolis, the trade-off is quite wide. You can actually go whichever way you want and get a very similar overall lap time. Obviously, when you're racing, you need the top speed, but in practice, not that difficult.
Looking at the weather today, how much are you going to learn this morning?
Yeah, good question. The track has got a dry line on it already. It's a little bit cool. It's going to be a bit warmer on Sunday, but maybe not a lot. I don't think it's going to be an easy day today, and we will be chasing the weather a little bit, but there's still work to be done.
Now, obviously, the bit that all the fans look at is the banking, but engineering-wise, is it an event?
Absolutely nothing to it. The loading on the car, loading on the tyres is not particularly high. It's just another feature.
Pat, best of luck, thank you.
Well, his two drivers have just gone first and second fast, Jenson Button and Jarno Trulli, but that's basically because they're the only ones to have completed flying laps.
Yeah, understood, Jens, understood. Do you want us to check the tyres in the pit lane? Do you want us to check the tyres in the pit lane? Yes, I think it'd be a good idea, yes.
He is still, of course, on those wet tyres, and the time he's done it's about 12, 14 seconds away from a regular quick time. Temperature's been actually, Pat Simmons made it sound like it was rather cold there. It's 19 degrees ambient, which isn't what it is here in the UK right now, and 20 degrees on track, but it's the track temperature that really is the more relevant temperature to the teams. And of course the tyre manufacturers have to anticipate what temperatures might be like, what conditions may be like. So in these initial track conditions, everybody a little bit tentative and sort of touchy-feely about how they just decide to do a couple of laps in concession to get an idea, are there any changes, or is it the same old stuff as last year?
Well, here you are riding with Heinz-Harald Frentzen as he takes part in an official Grand Prix session for the first time, driving for Sauber since 1996. So it's been a long time since he's been driving a Sauber, but here he is, back out once again for the Swiss team, with whom he made his Grand Prix debut in 1994. And let's see what he can achieve. Remember, we've heard that seating position is not ideal. He says the steering wheel's a little too close. Well, do you think that'll affect him much, John?
Well, it means he's going to be rather cramped, and over the period of the Grand Prix, it's a tough old Grand Prix, 73 laps. It may actually be more of a problem over that duration, but not over maybe a run of 5 or 6 laps. But don't forget, Heinz had a massive accident at Silverstone. He was testing this car, did a very strong job throughout Thursday of last week that took the fuel out, I understand, and he then went out for a time, and on the exit of Stowe on the way down to Vale, got, he says, a hair ran across the track. He thought he hit it. Other people think when they have seen the video of the accident he maybe just lost control. Whichever it was a big impact, ripped 3 wheels off the chassis, he got momentarily stunned and knocked out and was just taken away for a precautionary check. So already Heinz has had the real sort of feeling of what it is like to be back in a Sauber chassis in a fairly crap condition, and also have the big shunt.
Well, let's hope that he stays safe this weekend as he reacclimatises himself to the team, and he certainly has been driving for a few different teams over the last year or so. But at the moment it's Jenson Button fastest in this first free practice session for the United States Grand Prix. We're looking at Pedro de la Rosa making his way round in the Jaguar currently, and he's up on Jenson Button's time. No great surprise, the track is gradually getting a little drier on the infield, and we'll see the times improve. They're still about 14 seconds away from the pole time last year. Of course, we wouldn't expect them to get down to that anyway.
And he's coming into the pits.
Yep, so end of that particular run. Infield of the Indianapolis circuit not used except for the Grand Prix, so it tends to be quite dirty on this initial day of practice, so there's going to be a bit of cleaning up required as well.
Yes, and I mean, again, because of the rain that's fallen, of course, remember it's just a little after 11 o'clock in the morning here in Indianapolis, and the temperature will have an effect. It'll help dry that up, and historically that infield has taken longer than the actual oval part of the Indianapolis Grand Prix circuit to dry out. And watch Ralf Schumacher out, and this is on a set of dry weather grooved slick tyres.
Takuma Sato getting to grips with the track as well. He's visited the place before, but first time in a Grand Prix car, of course. Another track to learn for the Japanese driver, who's had a bit of an up and down season. Would really love to end the season well, both here and of course in Japan, of the last Grand Prix of the year, and we still don't know fully whether he will be driving for Jordan next year. Still some decisions to be made there.
I think the decision's a very straightforward and I would say very uncomplicated decision. Honda, you pay, you get your boy in my car.
Well, we'll wait to see if that's what happens. Michael Schumacher with test driver Luca Badoa to his right, just content to sit and wait, and hasn't even done an installation lap yet. So Michael and Barrichello, in fact, just waiting for everyone else to get out there and dry the track off.
And Takuma Sato, of course, learning the Indianapolis Grand Prix circuit. First time here, the man who's about to go quickest, is he? Well, he doesn't. He was quickest in second and third sectors. A little bit slower, in fact, but a lot slower in that first sector. He goes third quickest, but expect to see an improvement overall on this lap from the young Japanese driver, again running on a set of possibly, I think those are the intermediate Bridgestones that he's got on the Jordan Honda.
So the 25-year-old, whose this season's best result has been in 8th place, best qualifying performance has been 12th position on the grid. And there you can see once again those quick reflexes. Watch on board with him. Always see this, always attacking. Look at that, sliding, correcting, working quite hard at the wheel.
The only good thing for Sato is that all this is happening in a fairly predictable way. It looks dramatic when you see the onboard shots, but in fact, because the level of grip is relatively low, all these slides are happening and giving Sato a reasonable amount of warning, so he's prepared for it. And with that intermediate tyre, which of course we know how outstanding it is in conditions such as this, and in fact even pretty much in anything other than standing water. So Sato's deciding he's done his flying lap, he's going to come into the pits.
Okay.
So maybe it'll be a change on to slicks, as we saw Ralf Schumacher. There we do in fact see Schumacher, and that looks to me to be a set of grooved dry weather tyres.
Yes, I think he is on a dry set. When we saw him come out of the pits, it looked like he was on the dry groove tyre. Qualified in excellent second place here last year, but has yet to finish. He's much faster. Look at this, look at 5.6 seconds up at the second checkpoint. So the grooved tyres, the dry weather tyres, are definitely the ones to be on. Let's see if he finishes the lap. Yes, he will. He's running out wide. Here he comes through what is turn 1 of the Indy 500 course.
And I think he'll be about 7 seconds quicker than Jenson Button's time. As we wait and see, split the difference. Oh, it's 8 seconds. Well, a fair chunk of time, a 1:17.7, which is about where we would have expected things to be. The session being bone dry, and sort of having to wait. Now Michael Schumacher, who yet has not been out on track, neither has teammate Barrichello. So I think the message to Ferrari is it's time now to go out and start the work process. We heard Ross Brawn discuss a few months ago in that interview from the pit wall.
About 4 seconds off what the fastest time was here last year on Friday. It was set by Mika Hakkinen at a 1:13.3. So we're getting down towards that mark. There is Juan Pablo Montoya on track now. Of course, a former winner of the Indy 500. He won it in 2000 as a rookie. So he'd never competed in the Indy 500. Oh, and Schumacher's off. Ralph, that is, takes a spin.
Yes, that's just looking at us up, but I think it's round 8 and 9, so he's gone off at the end of the back straight into 8 and looped it onto the grass. So it is difficult. I mean, you think you've got the grip, the car gives you the message, yeah, the grip's there. I fooled you, I've spun it.
Well, he's got it back on again. And he was going quite quickly up to that point. He'd beaten his own first split time.
But his teammate has actually gone quicker when Pablo Montoya in that last sector picked up a bunch of time. So it's now Montoya from Ralf Schumacher.
So good little start for Williams, but of course it's still very slippery and we haven't seen the Ferraris out on track at all. Here comes Michael Schumacher then. He has taken both pole positions that have... both qualifying sessions that have been here in the past, the last 2 years, so yet to be beaten in qualifying on this track.
Well, the turn in, the back end starts to come around, and that's it. And Ralph goes for a very skiddy trip. And you can see the grass, of course, still very, very wet from the rain falling earlier this morning. Let's have a little look and see. And oh, there she goes. And Ralph looks around to the right, then looks back to the left just to make sure there's nothing that might be in the way that could cause a bit of damage to the car. And Pierre Dupasquet in the garage with the Michelin engineers along with Williams BMW. A little laugh at that incident. We go back to Montoya, half a second up as he comes through that second sector. So Montoya completing a second flying lap, hooks a wheel right down almost on the apron as he comes out of turn 13.
So a faster lap again then from Montoya, and some very energetic Colombian support for the man as he is set a 1:16.988. We ride now with his teammate who is also up on time, so this could be another quicker lap if he stays out there. And let's just watch him. You can just see that little bit of spray still being kicked up through what is turn 13 on the Formula 1 track, but turn 1 of course running the opposite direction on the Indianapolis Oval across the line, but he doesn't quite do it. He's a little slower through that last sector.
So we're still waiting to see both the Ferraris come out on track, and you know what will happen as soon as Michael does one lap, sets off and does a flying lap. What we've been watching for the last 24 or so minutes will be just decimated, no doubt, by Ferrari, and Jarno Trulli, currently 5th quickest, just taking time out of the car while the team do a little bit of work. Looks like the brakes are having a bit of adjustment, maybe some of the cooling ducts they want to replace, or in fact add to, just to get the brake temperature. So important, particularly when you've been on a long run. It's 1,822 metres from turn 11 all the way down to turn 1. That's a long way, almost 25 seconds. And those front brakes, in fact the brakes all round, will get pretty cold.
Yeah, it's a similar sort of distance that you get at Spa, all the way from La Source through Eau Rouge and up to Les Combes. It's a long, long way to be flat out on the throttle, and as you say, brake temperatures take a real tumble all the way down on such a heavy braking area into turn 1.
Then we're just looking at the Ferrari, and there's a white engine cover. Now the reason for that is it's an agreement that exists in the States with the tobacco companies and with the legislation that if a sponsor, in the case of Ferrari it's Marlboro, who also sponsor an IRL team, that being Penske, it's only possible in the United States to sponsor in one series. So because Formula 1 cars only come here once a year, it is the Formula 1 car that has to remove that tobacco advertising. Whereas last year we may have noted that McLaren were able to run with their tobacco sponsors, Ferrari again of course for the same reason. That is the reason. It's to do with an agreement between the tobacco companies and the government that they will only compete in one series in mainland USA.
Well, here is Michael Schumacher on track then, so we'll get an idea perhaps of just how quick the Ferrari will be. Let me just tell you that Alex Young is currently 3rd fastest, would you believe it, in the Minardi, a 1:20.203, so that's some 3 seconds slower than the two Williams. But nonetheless, he's 3rd, Fisichella 4th, ahead of Button, Trulli, Webber, Sato, Fredson and Panis are top 10.
And then Alex Young, as you were speaking, in fact just completed his 5th lap and improved further, so he's now into a 1:19.8.
Through all the corners. No, turn in and just since the braking. Okay, let's move the weight forwards. Take out the centre front aero. Yeah? Start with that at this point. So if we go -4 on the right hand side, Brad, +4 on the bib, please, Matty. And can we go 2, 3 on the front wing?
So quite a lot of little detailed changes moving forward. The weight to give it a further the mechanical advantage that a Grand Prix car would like on this particular circuit, as Michael Schumacher just checks his mirrors as he comes down start finish straight, and probably running, well, maybe not in this lap anyway, but certainly will be running during the more serious end of these practice sessions up close to 220 miles per hour.
Well, let's just watch that Ferrari in action once again. This car that has been the class of the field in 2002. Just look at the way it's on the limit straight away in his first flying lap. You can see how hard the car's working. He's not quite faster. There is a spin for, I think that's Mark
Webber, it is.
Isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, that's just on the exit of turn 4, I believe. So Mark loops for Minardi, keeps it running, and puts a bit of heat into those rear tyres, but is able to continue.
Yes, doesn't cause problem for Schumacher. He's a little further ahead, being a bit cautious through the slippery stuff. Jacques Villeneuve's also on track. He was just a little bit behind Webber.
But it's Olivier Panis' teammate who is now fastest at a 1:16.7. So the two Williams who dominated almost half of this 1 hour session now being eclipsed by Panis. But Michael Schumacher fastest of all in that second sector. Ben, I said he'd be quickest of all in his first flying lap. Will he be or not?
I think he will, John. Here we go, across the line, and it is a 1:16.2. He's faster straight away by half a second. But don't forget, the track is still drying up a little bit. Track improving every lap at the moment, and Michael Schumacher making full use of that car and its legendary now abilities. This is what happened to Mark Webber. Just the back end of the car stepped away from him, but he kept it all running and has rejoined the fray. No problems for the Australian.
Yeah, that was up on turn 6, which is that long, it's almost a 180 degree left-hand turn. Always frustrating for a driver because it keeps going and going and going, and you're waiting to find the grip. That's on. That is, yes, a red flag. That is coming out of turn 13. He has gone straight off into the wall. That's the first time we've seen a Formula 1 car hit the barrier. There's one of the left front wheel. Immediately red flagged the track, and a heavy impact. Now the left rear has come off the car. Well, that came off and that caused the accident. We don't know. We will get, no doubt, a quick replay of that, but certainly a big wake-up call for Rubens Barrichello, the winner of the Italian Grand Prix 2 weeks ago.
Well, I was just about to say that that wall up on the outside turn 13, using this new barrier system, which was incorporated for this year's Indy 500, it's now not a concrete wall that they hit on the outside. I was just about to talk about that, and the next shot we see is that somebody has hit it hard. Let's see what happened.
Watch for a wheel coming off the Ferrari. There it is. He's gone round, and there is no left wheel on that Ferrari. The wheel there, well, I didn't think it was. It's difficult. We need to see that again, because clearly something let go very rapidly, because as he came midway through the corner, he was already in a high-speed spin. So Rubens walks away from a shunt, and the new barrier that was built here is called Safe Steel and Foam. Whatever. I'll find it. I've got it here, believe me.
Yeah, the new system for greater safety, but that is the damage done to the Ferrari. There was something wrong with that car as it came into view. It was already spinning, but it looked like the rear wheel was actually still attached, but it looked like something might have collapsed or broken. before he came into view on start-finish area. So the red flag's out, a bit of a clear-up operation to go on here. And as you say, it's we've never actually seen a Formula One car into the wall. It was talked about a great deal with the use of the banked turns. But I think Bruce Jones is with him right now. Let's go to Bruce.
Rubens Barrichello, we've just seen you hit the wall. How do you feel? Are you injured or just unfortunate?
No, I don't know what happened. I don't know if the tire exploded or if I don't know.
So there's no warning and you just sort of pulled left?
The car just, I don't know. Let me check.
Okay, tough luck. Thanks, Rubens.
Another look at it there, John. A quick replay, and again, it was already spinning as it came into view, but you know, that's a flat-out corner, isn't it? It's a straightforward corner, that one.
I mean, okay, the car's not reaching the speeds in the straight that they would reach maybe in qualifying or possibly in the race, but nevertheless, I would say Barrichello doing the thin end of 180 miles an hour when that car went out of control. Just to go back to this new barrier system that they've introduced at Indy, and it's behind those advertisings. It's called SAFER, which is steel and foam energy reduction, and really it worked very successfully in the Indy 500 this year. And it's a form of barrier which is being looked at. I think Charlie Whiting, who is the race director at all the Grand Prix throughout the season, is very interested to see whether it has an application for Formula One. Let's look again and see. Well, was it either a puncture? Rubens thought it might have been a tyre, but to me, you can just about see the edge of the tyre, whether it had folded under or not. It's still in contact with the car at that point, and then it just breaks away the rim and tyre. So, well, was that a mechanical failure? Was it a tyre problem?
Something very strange there. Something failed, but it's hard to determine what it is from the pictures. And Ferrari, no doubt, will be studying that closely.
Well, that's the onboard shot. That's the onboard camera shot. Looking back now, I wonder, would that give us a clue whether we can get a replay of that particular view, the backward view from Barrichello's Ferrari? In fact, the damage to the car, while it looks severe, is in fact probably not that much indeed. The trouble for Barrichello and Ferrari is that this looks like it's the end of Rubens' day for Friday anyway, because they'll have to get that car back. They will have an hour between these two sessions to work on the car, plus whatever time they can get back for the remainder of this session. But, well, you know, when you're at the top of the world, everything is just impossible not to go well, then something like this just wakes you up and tells you that Formula One, however safe racetracks are, however safe Grand Prix cars are, it is still a dangerous sport.
Michael Schumacher getting the headphones on, the headset on in the Ferrari garage, and no doubt talking to some of the guys who are over there with the car to try and find out what's going on here, what might have caused the incident. There's going to be a definite cause for concern for the team and for Michael. Now that isn't still on the rim, is it, that tyre? It's I don't know whether the rim disintegrated when it hit the wall or what quite there, but no doubt we'll find out more. A lot of bits and pieces to be picked up as Luca Badoa, test driver, looks a bit concerned. But
look at the skid marks, Ben. I mean, that is a very acute angle at which Rubens hit the barrier. When we were accustomed to seeing cars at Indy doing a similar thing but going in the opposite direction. But that was a heavy, heavy impact. And those new SAFER barriers, that's what they're called. You see, he was on the grass. In fact, he'd been across the grass before he ever... that was the incident started, caused him to get on the grass, and that then caused the car then to spin up the banking. When you get on a banking, you put opposite lock on, which is what Rubens would have instinctively done. The car will ultimately take a bite, and then it will shoot it up to the barrier, to the top. And one of the big no-nos on an oval racetrack is that if the back end gets away, you don't start to try to fight it by putting opposite lock on, because that will lead to a much more severe incident than if you just allow the car to spin and then let whatever effect occur.
Well, it was his first proper flying lap. He'd only done the installation lap up to that point. First flying lap, but it all went very wrong indeed. And the Bridgestone engineers down there obviously very concerned in case there was any sort of tyre issue that led to it. But let's just wait to see and no doubt get some word from Ferrari as to what happened a little later. That is the point of contact then on this new barrier system.
And again, just as an excess gate, which is that piece of Armco barrier, those 3 layers of Armco barrier, fortunately he hit that new steel and foam energy reduction part, the barrier prior to that piece of Armco, the difference would have been quite marked, I'm sure, at the speed of impact with the kinetic energy involved in an accident of that magnitude. So for the first time, Ben, I think in the 3 years now we've been coming to Indianapolis, that's the first time I can remember seeing a Grand Prix car have a really severe bite at the concrete walls around the Indy circuit.
Yes, indeed. Well, it's not the ideal start to free practice at Indianapolis. The session, of course, having been stopped with the red flags as soon as it was seen that Barrichello had hit the wall. Thankfully, it didn't involve anyone else. Olivier Panis was very close behind him as he came through the corner.
He was. He had to get on the binders pretty quickly. And again, just from a technical standpoint, watching that the Ferrari, the way it is, being craned back. We heard the Williams team wanting to shift static weight forward in the chassis. Well, you can see that the Ferrari's got a lot of static weight forward because the way the car's hanging from that wrecker, as they call them here at Indianapolis, clearly Ferrari have come here with a car with a lot of static weight quite far forward. Let's look at it again. Well, the rear wheel, it does look at the rear wheel was still attached to the suspension.
Now Peter has one of the Bridgestone engineers with him. Peter.
I have indeed. Yes, you've just had a good look at Ruben's car there on the truck. What was your opinion of the tyres on the car?
Of course, we need to check one more time when car comes back. But I think from just the appearance of the tyre will be no problem.
Yeah, it looked to be more or less in one piece there. Difficult to tell with some of the accident debris there. Big accident though.
Yeah, from a distance anyway, we can't see any details, so we need to see more details when car comes back.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Peter. And it's going to take a little bit of investigation there to find out exactly what happened. The onboard camera is still showing us the view as the car gets carried away, as you say, John, somewhat nose down in attitude. So the weight on the car further forward than it might be at some of the tracks. And we heard Williams talking about moving their weight forward for Montoya. That's something that they were looking to do anyway.
I mean, that incident started quite a long way back in turn 13, and Barrichello would have been well aware that whatever that caused the failure, it was very sudden. He had really little chance to do anything about it, and particularly at the speed he was travelling, and particularly in a corner with a degree of banking, that's about 9 degrees, I think, 13 possibly. So Rubens gets back, and his wife there well, she must have been shocked to see her husband sitting in the car, one wheel off and another one at a rather drunken angle. But look, the hub looks, we need to get a static look. I'm really second guessing as a car goes past, and I mean, when the Ferrari get that car back to their garage, and no doubt the shutters will come down as they will want to investigate, but I hope that they are able to give us some insight into what did cause that incident. But certainly a massive shock for Barrichello, and he would have instinctively reacted.
I just felt that it was something broken. It started to spin, and then I hit it sideways. It could be a puncture.
When you see the car first coming round, and when it goes into the wall, the tyre is missing off the rim. So,
Thanks, Bob.
Well, interesting, because from rival teams they might be, but in a situation like this, John, everybody needs to know as quickly as possible what might have caused an accident like this.
Yes, and I think Patrick Head of Williams to come down to Rubens and give him the benefit of what he saw, what he believes he's seen, and he may have looked at it again on probably the very same pictures that you're getting at home. There are other pictures available, of course, if you go through the various options on your handset, but Patrick Head feeling that in these situations it's more important for teams and drivers to have all knowledge available, all, if you like, opinion, which is what Patrick gave. But it certainly seems logical that it was either a wheel failure that caused the tyre to literally watch again and see if we get a... I mean, he was facing the wall head on at that point.
It does look as though the car's sitting down.
Yes, it does. It looks like the left rear of the car is down. And again, there's the bits of wheel and... Well, I think that looks to me, the way the wheel is disintegrating there, whether it was a wheel failure or whether a tyre, the seal of the tyre bead against the rim, whether that was the cause. Well, Bridgestone no doubt will take their equipment away and examine it minutely. Ferrari will do the same with their equipment. I'm slightly concerned that you can see, I think, a part of the hub of the wheel attached to the upright of the car, so that may also be either cause or event.
Well, here on F1 Digital Plus, you've seen it happen live. It's the only place you'll be able to watch action like that taking place on a Friday in free practice, and that's going to be one of the stories of the weekend. Ferrari in trouble in the very first session of free practice for the United States Grand Prix, the first red flag of the weekend, and indeed the first contact with the barrier up on the outside of that turn 13. So the drivers and teams elsewhere in the pit lane just taking an opportunity to take a break. Eddie Irvine just chatting to his engineers. Let's go to Peter Windsor now, who's talking to Patrick Head.
Patrick, we just saw you walking up there to have a chat to Rubens. What were you talking about there, if we may ask?
No, I was really wanting to ask him if he knew what the cause was, because certainly something failed. There's no way that it was a driver error, and you could see when the car, although it was already spinning, when it actually hit the wall first, the tyre was shifted across on the rim as if the car had got a puncture or something had happened to the tyre. But Ruben said yes, he felt something just go at the back, but he didn't know whether it was a puncture or what.
We were just talking to Suganama from Bridgestone. He was having as good a look at the car as he could while it was on the truck there, and he said it appeared not to be a tyre problem, but maybe he would say that.
Maybe he would.
On another subject altogether, Patrick, Juan Pablo Montoya was saying yesterday that the problem with his car that caused his retirement in Monza was nothing to do with him at all, and actually showed up on Sunday morning warm-up. He felt something a bit funny with the car then, and in retrospect that was probably something beginning to fail at the front.
He hasn't mentioned that since, but yes, it was a... he hasn't mentioned that he felt it in warm-up, but it was a failure in a chassis structure on the mounting of the front suspension, which meant that the front suspension. Very surprising, and obviously we've taken steps to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Does it come under the heading of racing cars should be strong enough not to fail when they're bounced over curbs?
Well, I mean, yes, we've got to make the cars strong enough for anything Juan Pablo can do to them, apart from driving them into a wall. But we certainly don't hold the driver at fault, but certainly Juan Pablo's got a pretty robust style, and that includes bouncing across a few curbs.
One final point, I gather also he had a bit of a misfire in the race as well. Is that correct?
That was only on the main straight, and it was a traction control setting which applied only to the first corner, but it was having an effect on the engine on the straight. I don't think it was losing him much lap time. The biggest loss of lap time was the fact that he'd been off the track and wiped off half the aerodynamic devices on the left-hand side.
Well, misfires don't sound as they used to. I was on the pit wall, and 18.8 or whatever it was sounded perfect to me, but I suppose it would at 18.8.
Your ears are obviously not as perceptive as they used to be, Peter.
Thank you very much, Pat.
Okay, good.
Well, thank you, Peter. And another close-up view of Barrichello's accident there, John.
Yes, and I think what from Patrick Head has said, his observations, and clearly it's either tyre or wheel related. And we have seen in the past where teams have been given wheels that have failed under stress. That's the kind of incident where a wheel might collapse for some reason, just a faulty rim, and of course then the tyre would immediately deflate, and that would be the reason why he went out of control. Equally, the tyre could have separated from the bead of the wheel for other reasons, which could have caused what we have seen, or has been suggested it might be a tyre problem in itself. So there's probably three areas that both Ferrari and Bridgestone will investigate initially, because it doesn't look like it was a mechanical failure, i.e. it wasn't, let's say, something like a suspension component, but we have to wait and hear what the two parties involved say. They will make no doubt an official statement at some point, and as soon as we get that, we'll bring that to you.
Well, as we've seen, concern spreads throughout the pit lane in an incident like this, and of course with the rival tyre company, they will look at it very closely. Bruce Jones has been talking to Michelin's Pierre Dupasquier.
Pierre Dupasquier, just seen all of you Michelin engineers having a big talk. Are you concerned that the cars running your tyres might have the same problem as Rubens Barrichello had in his Ferrari on the Bridgestones?
No, we just wonder what can happen, because the slow motion is not clear enough so far for us to understand what's going on. So something happened on the Rubens driving the car. That's all we know today at that time. So it has to be analyzed carefully. But we're always concerned when something happens which is not expected. Try to find out that it's not supposed to happen to other people anyway. So that's the general idea. It's not a concern, it's just trying to understand not to reproduce it.
Obviously, it's a hard place to hit with a concrete wall on the outside. Just looking at the conditions today, a lot of wind. Does that really affect as the drivers come onto the start-finish straight? Do you think that could be a problem?
I don't think so. It does affect the car a lot when they are at the limit. But this curve is flat out, bang, bang. It's not at the limit of traction, of adherence. So there's still margin to cope with some unexpected wind or whatever happens. That's what... one hypothesis was that Rubens could use the white lane, which doesn't make a lot of sense, because even if he does it's not supposed to give such a lack of traction at that particular place. So we don't know yet.
We'll see. Thank you very much for talking.
So, as we say, concern up and down pit lane with an incident like that, but we are almost set for the session to restart. In fact, it's about 50 seconds time. It's now going to be underway once again.
Yes, it's interesting listening to Patrick when Peter asked him about Juan Pablo Montoya, suggesting that there actually was a problem prior to the race, but that he didn't maybe communicate it to the team. But from what I've understood, I think that what may have contributed to that failure, and basically what it was a suspension component mounting in the chassis that actually got pulled out. Now that's pretty rare, because I tell you what, Williams build plenty strong cars. One might suggest that part of, and Patrick I think alluded to it, the frustration that Juan Pablo maybe felt during the Grand Prix as things unwound and he found himself going slower and slower, was maybe he himself was slightly more aggressive than ordinary or than normal, and that was a contributory factor. It wasn't the total reason, but it was a contributory factor. And some of the curbs at Monza, of course, we know are very, very aggressive curbings, and if you just go at them just willy-nilly, well then you will ultimately do damage to your car.
Now as the track reopens, Peter Windsor's caught up with another Bridgestone user, Gary Anderson.
Gary, we just come down to have a chat with you because you're on Bridgestones. Any thoughts about that Rubens accident and perhaps how it might impact on the tyres you're running?
No, I don't think it was really any problem. I'd say either got a puncture or he was just on his outlap, so maybe the start pressure was a little bit low coming through here, came off the rim, but one of those two happened, and hopefully it won't happen again.
You think the tyre could come off the rim just from running pressures a bit too low?
Yeah, I mean, that can happen. Obviously, here with the banking, you come into this pretty quick, and you just need to make sure that the start pressure is high enough. It's obviously cold and a bit down by the back, so you're making the tyres work and getting the pressure up on the outlap is quite difficult. So, I don't know what happened, but I'd say it's some one of those two, either an instant puncture or the tyre come off the rim.
It's a very good point, of course, because we do have a certain amount of vertical G on the tyre. What sort of vertical G are we getting on the banking?
We haven't got any data this year yet, so I'd be sort of wrong to say anything. It's not very high. It's just, as I say, it's a deceiving corner because of the banking. So you can come into there, tyres are still a bit cold from the outlap, and you get quite a high load on them. So I'd put my money on that one. We've obviously increased our pressures a little bit just in case, but we think that's probably what happened.
Thanks, Gary. Good input.
No problem.
Interesting comment there from Gary, Tom.
Yes, and the reason why it's interesting is because Gary Anderson spent time out in the States not that many years ago working for Reynard, and he knows these bank circuits very intimately indeed. So it's an interesting thought that just something as simple and probably unanticipated as maybe a low tyre pressure, but the load in it just enough to break the bead. That's the seal between the tyre sidewall and the rim itself. And of course, once that happens, there's an immediate rush of air and the tyre goes flat as a pancake, and you're sailing into the barriers, as we've seen on a number of reviews and replays of Rubens. Big wake-up call.
Well, with the session having been stopped, we've still got 28.5 minutes of this session to go, and it also means that we'll see some quicker times coming through fairly quickly, I should think. Michael Schumacher is fastest overall so far. He put in a quick lap just before the reds came out. It was a 1:15.188, a full 1.6 seconds faster than Olivier Panis. Mika Salo was third fastest, then it was Montoya and Ralf Schumacher who'd run a fairly quick set of laps early on in the session, and then Heidfeld, Webber, Jung and this man, Fisichella. He was ninth before the red flag came out, just beginning to pick up some pace now as this session gets underway again.
And it'll be interesting to see whether Ferrari decide to send out Michael Schumacher for the remainder of the session of just under 30 minutes remaining, 27 minutes and 45 seconds. So Ferrari may choose to sit out the remaining part of this session to investigate Barrichello's problem and try and find out as quickly as possible if it was something, as Gary Anderson suggested, or maybe as Patrick Head thought, because I don't think Rubens actually knows. He just knows that all of a sudden the back end of the car went down, the right front went up, and he was on a high-speed ride, the sort of thing you go to Disney World and pay dollars for. This one was for real.
Absolutely. Well, Jacques Villeneuve's on track at the moment. Michael, as you say, is still engaged in conversations with the Ferrari engineers as they look at what happened in that incident. The two Williams boys are on track, but Fisichella's not on track anymore.
Yes, and that's the same corner. I think we saw Mark Webber go off. That's, I think it could be actually 9 or 10.
Yeah, it is up at that same part of the track that we saw Webber spin. He lets the Minardi go through, he lets his teammate pass as well. No damage done. We've seen spins up there in the past. Even Schumacher himself has had a problem up at that section of the track in the past, but no problems for the moment. The Jordan boys making full use of the fact that the cameras are on them. And the Williams drivers now, let's see whether they can get down to the times that have been set by Ferrari.
Well, Montoya kicking up the moisture, you saw as he just clipped the edge of the grass as he came into turn 13, a little plume of spray knocked up in the air. So, you know, a driver in these conditions, you don't want to be a little bit overconfident. You want to respect the fact that you can just sometimes push the envelope too far. Locks up as he turns in, has to struggle to get the car back through turn 2.
Let's take a look here. This was Fisichella going off a moment ago. We saw him on the grass, but that's how he got there.
Yes, but he actually wasn't on a racing line. I think he was just trying to get out of the way. Another car may have come through and he just stayed off the line. Of course, got trapped on the outside of the corner and then just dragged onto the grass. And all unnecessary, as Heinz-Harald Frentzen at turn 1 also finds that, well, there are limits after all. Here's the blend back into the racetrack, and that brings you in just at the exit of 2, leading into turn 3.
Hello.
Looking here at Kimi Räikkönen for McLaren Mercedes. Coulthard and Räikkönen haven't really set any times. They've done 3 laps in this session. Now they're beginning to go a little quicker. Only 13th though with that first flying lap from the Finn. Looking to back up Mika Häkkönen's victory here 12 months ago. What of course has turned out to be Häkkönen's last Grand Prix win, with his retirement being confirmed during this season. Takuma Sato coming through the shop. We've got Fisichella just trying to find a way past Alex Jung.
Well, he came out of the slipstream, tried to dive down the inside of Alex Jung, but was not able to get the job done. We're seeing speeds on the straight just prior to turn 1. They're picking up now the 329 kilometres, just over the 200 miles per hour. So conditions basically all the way back at turn 11, and also in conjunction with using the grooved slick tyre, contributing. Sun coming out now as well. You can see some of the reflections off the car. The sky is opening up, and no doubt track temperatures as well as ambient are beginning to rise, and that will also play its role in picking up time for all the teams.
Yeah, it's good to see some sunshine. You can see it on the golf course as well on the inside. Of course, when they built this infield road course, they had to be a bit protective of that golf course. The golf course almost as old as the oval itself. Another spin from Minardi. It's Webber again.
Yes, again down in turn 8. Now it's a funny corner. It's not a particularly difficult corner, but of course it's relatively, look at the water. I mean, it's almost like you can see the spray can barely get traction, and even that with traction control, it just creeps ever so slowly. The good news is here that these runoff areas, the bits of grass, are like, well, just like the Belfry where the Ryder Cup is being played this weekend. They are immaculate.
Yeah, it is superbly presented as ever. As we take a look at Nick Heidfeld here, a man who has been joined by next year's teammate a little earlier than he might have otherwise thought. De La Rosa's just popped up to second fastest. Fisichella is third, so we're seeing a few changes, but still no one has beaten the time that Michael Schumacher set just before the red flags came out for Barrichello's accident. Interesting how that pool of water up there, John, has still not moved. There's obviously a little bit of a drainage problem.
What's happening is there's a very slight bit of banking there, so the water is just purely by gravity, just being allowed to run off the grassy part of the off-field, then onto the track. And on the actual racing line, there's enough traffic on circuit now to produce a line, but of course it's not going to be a drying line until the entire swathe of water finally evaporates or disappears or dries up or whatever.
Coulthard is 6th fastest, stays 6th fastest on that lap, 319 kilometres per hour. Now we've got a 329 kilometres per hour speed trap trigger from Fisichella. I'm not sure if that might be a little spurious. And then again, Villeneuve did 325.
But remember, we saw Fisichella coming up behind Alex Young into turn 1. He may have just picked up the benefit of that too. So a lot of factors come into play in relation to top speeds.
Yeah,
as we watch Alan McNish with all the grunt that Toyota have got. Absolutely flat out.
Only enough for 18th. Let's listen up as he comes into turn 1. It's an awfully long time to wait until you have to get on the brakes.
I mean, you're sitting there and it's just
right as well. The rear is
second after second down the straight.
At the moment. A bit oversteering the entry. A bit understeering through the quick one after that. And generally sort of understeering if we're going quite slow into 4, but if we're going quick, the rear is. But everything's calmed down a lot more. The balance is not bad.
Track conditions improving, no doubt, and being careful not to change the car too much. But Michael Schumacher is not going out there for the moment. He is fastest still. He's only done 4 laps, but he's still fastest overall.
Well, Jenson Button looks pretty good, and the time reflects that 19,000th of a second. So as Button makes his way around turn 6 into 7, this is the back straightway, second quickest part of the racetrack, and into turn 8. Now for some reason turn 8 we've seen a number of cars off. Whether there's something there we aren't aware of, maybe people slightly misjudge the speed they need to reduce as they come into turn 8. Then through 9, then that sort of unfortunate 9 and 10 sequence of corners, very slow then. Through 11, and then the run all the way up back onto pit straight.
So it doesn't look as though it's going to beat Michael's time, but this will move Button up the order. He's down in 16th place at the moment, hasn't done any laps for a little while, so this will bring him back into sort of top 5 or so. Let's just see where it puts him. Across the line, 3rd for Jenson Button.
So Renault looking to see sort of a repeat of what they had in Monza, 4th and 5th. And everybody expected, I think, us primarily, that the Renault was going to make 2 stops, but they made a first stop, which was probably within the zone for a 2-stop race, but then just kept going and going and going, and to get their 2 cars in the top 6, pick up points, consolidates their position 4th in the championship, 9 ahead of the Sauber team. Are really more concerned. Sauber are more concerned with an attack from Jaguar, who elevated themselves up to 6th in the championship, some 3 points behind the Swiss-based Sauber team.
Well, the flat-out bit starts here and goes on and on. And on and on until finally he's off the throttle and on the brake, and that's how hard the engine is working at this Indianapolis track. Let's just take a look back, and there's Ross Brawn studying the wheel rim, the broken wheel rim.
Yes, now they'll look for telltale signs, because if there was a problem with the rim, even sometimes in a visual inspection you can see whether that rim has had a minute hairline fracture, or maybe just simply it was, as suspected by Gary Anderson, maybe a low tyre pressure and just too much load on the tyre, and it gave way.
Jenson Button's back in, and now
we've got 1 time lap for the oil temperature, and we'll have to pit to sort the cooling out. So 1 time lap and come in, please.
So he's only going to get the 1 flying lap in this time. He's 3rd fastest, remember. Michael Schumacher still having set the pace in just 4 laps in the free practice session. First free practice session at the United States Grand Prix. 2nd place for Pedro de la Rosa for Jaguar. That's a good effort. The man you're looking at here, Jacques Villeneuve, down in 17th place currently, although his teammate Olivier Panis was well up the order for a while, and at the moment finds himself down in 14th place. The times have changed rapidly as the track conditions have improved. So nothing really to give us a clear indicator of relative performances.
And a lot of work now going on in the garages. Only 3 cars out on track. Jenson Button has just gone out. Jarno Trulli is currently out. In fact, McNish, who was also out, he's come back in. So just the 2 Renaults out on track, while the business in the garages very busy indeed. As Ralf Schumacher sits, and was he going to get out of the car, or is he going to stick the helmet back on again? And we dive down the pit lane a bit further down to Eddie Irvine, still buoyed up by that great success in Monza, 3rd place on the podium. And the real Eddie Irvine, I think we saw, he disguises it so well with all that sort of verbalising that he gets up to. The fact was, Eddie Irvine on that podium was an emotional man. In the press conference afterwards, he was an emotional man, and the little boy in Eddie Irvine was there for all to see.
Yeah, he was delighted, and it meant so much to him as well to produce a performance like that at Monza in Italy, which is a country he has so much affection for. We're just looking at Button, who's gone on to his flying lap. Remember, we're only going to see one flying lap, according to what we heard his engineers tell him a moment ago. And you can follow his progress around the track, coming up to turn 4. Quite tight through here, and then he's got the quick flat out turn 5, and then down onto the brakes into turn 6.
Yes, looks quite spectacular. A lot of attitude on the Renault. Jenson was testing last week again at Silverstone. There's quite a substantial test there, and he suffered from dizziness. He had to be taken out of the car, or he volunteered to step out. Olivier Gavin came and took his place, and sort of some people are saying that these dizzy spells sort of seem to have begun about the same time as he signed a contract for BAR. Now, is that cynical pit lane chat, or is it just simple truth?
Well, they did say that Fernando Alonso, a fellow Renault test driver for Renault, also seemed to have some problems. So they were saying there might have been some sort of bizarre ear infection going around. Maybe that's what was affecting Jenson Button. Well, for the moment, he seems okay. I suppose if you're going to get dizzy anywhere, you might get dizzy here around this long right-hander onto the start-finish straight, but Jenson Button seems fine. He stays in 3rd place at the moment with a very similar lap to the one he did before, just a few hundredths of a second slower.
So Juan Pablo Montoya just lines up to do a little launch control start.
I can't really see much. Okay, Juan, we'll sort it out for the next stop.
Well, as Montoya makes his way out, a big engagement ring there for Connie Fradel, fiancée of Juan Pablo, and a big smile on her face as well. Now, Toyota, I said it was their first time here to the United States, and of course we're still waiting for Toyota to announce their driver lineup for next year, and we've got the chance now to hear from team boss Ove Anderson.
Ove Anderson, this must be one of the tracks which you were worried about coming to. It's very different from any others, and the first year here with everyone else having more experience.
Yeah, but that has been more or less the same case for us the whole year, so we are here to learn this time. Hopefully we will come back with something better next year.
Were you very disappointed with the results at Monza? Alan going well, having a problem, and Mika obviously crossing the white line?
Yeah, I must say I was really disappointed because we had more or less a point in the bag, and we lost it like that. That's unfortunate, but these things happen when you're in competition.
Now it's your big race in 2 weeks' time in Suzuka. Is that when you'll be announcing the second driver?
Yes, exactly. That's our second home race of the season.
Ove, thank you.
Every expectation is that the second driver to be announced will be Cristiano De Mata, who's on his way to winning the Champ Car title in the United States at the moment, having won some 6 races, and it looks as though they have managed to do the deal, but we'll find out for sure in a couple of weeks.
In the meantime, Mark Webber, and he makes his way down this long straight, and Webber sees a small improvement. Well, he's actually still in 13th place on a 16.5, so that lap, in fact, slightly slower.
this 2.6 mile track. Combination of this tight infield section and the fast sweep through the banking. This is where we join the 2.5 mile oval and just use the one corner. Here it is, going the wrong way to the normal direction, and a flat out corner with no problem at all in a Formula 1 car. But the tyre marks left by Barrichello's car, plain to see through there. Now heading down towards turn 1.
He's just hitting the limiter as he comes down into turn 1. You hear that sort of pip, pip. So gearing critical. There's a little bit of a tailwind, as we've mentioned, and that affects gearing. And Ralf Schumacher, and that again into turn 8.
And he's taken the rear wing off, so a little more damage done. And look at the damp grass not allowing him to...
The rear wing's broken on our car.
Now there's a problem if he does succeed in getting back on track, as he may shed that wing somewhere around the remaining part of the lap.
Well, he's going to get there. I think he...
See the rear wing's broken.
Look at the spray. Great shot. Brilliant pictures as Ralph tries to reach. Oh, and he leaves the wing behind.
Well, that's what I thought might happen. Now, of course, we're going to have to another... Well, you might see another red flag. I don't know whether they'd let a marshal, particularly here in North America with all the liability regulations, run out and pick that one up. It would certainly be a courageous man that did it.
So Patrick looks at that and says, right, we've got a bit of work to do. There's a Formula 1 car that many people would like to see Formula 1 cars like that, John, without any wings at all. Some people say it would improve the racing.
Well, one thing that would happen would be your top speed would dramatically increase, but of course it wouldn't do much for stability under braking.
No, that's right. Reduce the amount of sponsorship that you can get on a car as well, which some people don't like. Let's see him go off. Let's see what happened here.
Well, I think this is pretty much a straightforward, simple lose the back end. There it is. Once he's on the grass, he has got no chance whatsoever. And the barrier just says, come to me, Ralphie, and there it is. I mean, a fairly harmless impact in itself, but wings are not designed to be given loads of that direction. So it just pops forward and breaks the mounting.
Of course, if the grass had been dry, he probably wouldn't have got half the distance across there.
He would have certainly had a better chance of getting it slowed down and might have just, well, there's a courageous man, runs out, picks up the rear wing, and that will be no doubt returned to the Williams team, as it's maybe going to be more than just taking off one wing, putting on another. There may be damage around the actual mounting itself, which may in turn have to be removed. So with just under 10 minutes, 9.5 minutes of the session remaining, I think that's pretty much the end of the session for Ralf Schumacher.
Now let's see what's going on the overall. Giancarlo Fisichella here set a personal best through the first sector of the lap. He's 6th currently. Still no one has beaten the time that Michael Schumacher set very much earlier on in this session, before Rubens Barrichello had his accident, at 1:15.188, and we're still nearly half a second slower. But now Fisichella does get a bit closer to it, possibly. He's got to finish the lap off.
He certainly could be in the top 3 with this lap, assuming he gets through these final 3 corners, and there's no reason to believe he will not. Absolutely flat out through 12 and 13. So Giancarlo Fisichella looking to elevate himself a top 3 berth. Who's second?
He goes second, so yes, still nobody beats Schumacher's time, but we now have a Jordan in second, a Jaguar in third, the second Jaguar in fourth. So once again, both Jags are running well. You're looking at Frentzen in the Sauber, and of course, part of the reason for bringing Frentzen into the Sauber this weekend, John, is all about the Constructors' battle, the Constructors' Championship battle, and Sauber watching what Jaguar are doing in these last few races and trying to defend their position.
And he's going to go about 6th quickest. This is a good lap for Frentzen, and do a good job for the team, I believe, too. Goes 9th, in fact.
Now, we haven't seen much of the McLarens on circuits, and indeed Kimi Raikkonen has only just come back out on track. He's been in the pits for a long time. Peter Windsor's talking to Ron Dennis to find out what the problem's been.
Ron, obviously Kimi out now, but has he had a problem this morning?
No, just optimising the car for the circuit. We've got a few things we're trying, so early days.
So you can do that all on the laptop. He doesn't need to be out. You can do that on the laptop. He doesn't need to be out there driving then.
There's no place like doing it on the track, actually.
Few incidents this morning, Ferrari and now Williams. Interesting to see that.
Yeah. Ferrari always seem to have it in the, it's never the race.
Thanks, Ron.
So no actual problems for Raikkonen then, just no need to get him out on track straight away. This was the work going on in Williams pits, as Patrick Head said, right boys, this is what we need to do. hands-on as ever.
Yes, and what they're looking at is the wing mounting itself, which of course is part of that rear crushable structure as Fisichella takes another little off-course excursion. That was round into turn 3 out of 2, just a little bit hot out of 2, and it gets it wrong. Puts the brakes on just to shoot out into the gravel that would have gathered in the underfloor of the car. Ralph and Mrs. Ralph walk away. They know that there's not much they're going to do for the next 6 minutes and 30-odd seconds. So go back, have a coffee and a bit of a chat, and Giancarlo just gets it just a bit too quick into turn 3.
Bit over-optimistic, perhaps.
You'll have to scratch that simulation, Nick, because we need to check the wheels because he's been off. Make sure there's no cuts or anything.
So that's that, as you can gather from the radio communication, affects the team and their work program. Little mistakes like that by the drivers might look harmless enough, but of course it does affect the team. They're going through a program of different tests throughout the Friday, and it just sets them back a bit when something like that happens.
First real glimpse of David Coulthard, and of course McLaren doing a very strong test indeed. Alexander Wurz once again ending up quickest in that test in Barcelona last week. So they're confident. You could see Ron Dennis's face, you know, he's got a stony face at times, but when he's happy it shows, and Ron looks pretty confident right now, and they feel that they may well be in with a serious shout of challenging Ferrari and Williams for victory here on Sunday.
So let's now ride on board Jacques Villeneuve. Let's see what he's up to. He's down in 13th place at the moment, and as ever, good fun to watch. Powered teams, whether we can ever detect any difference in revs that either team might be running.
And especially even on turn 9. So we should maybe try again. Yeah, stick on the front.
Yes.
Jenson Button on circuit now as well. And the Renaults have been running reasonably competitively so far today. He's down in 7th place. Remember, one of Jenson's best qualifying performances was when they first came here in 2000. He qualified 6th for Williams and comprehensively out-qualified Ralph on that particular day.
Yeah, but he did trip over his present teammate Jarno Trulli in that race. And in fact, they found each other on a number of occasions in that 2000 season, the first year for Jenson Button, which turned out to be rather a honeymoon. It's been into the bump and grind over last year, and to some degree, and certainly the second half of this year, truly finally coming to terms with the Renault chassis. And Jenson, of course, going BAR bound for the next 4 years beginning next season.
Now, what's Sato been up to? Ooh, he got a bit of a slide on, but he managed to get it sorted before he hit the puddle, so he didn't go off. And a little adjustment on the steering wheel just to make sure. Still Kimi Räikkönen, there he is. He did come out briefly, but he's gone back into the pits once again. 11th fastest. David Coulthard is currently 9th fastest, having completed 10 laps. Most laps today in this first session have been completed by Takuma Sato. He's done some 20 laps, and of course the fewest laps have been completed by the 2 Ferrari drivers. Barrichello didn't even get a flying lap in before his accident, and Michael Schumacher only completed 4 laps before Barrichello had his accident, and ever since then we've seen Ferrari keeping Michael in the pits.
And there's a couple of other debutants here. Mark Webber, of course, he's done 18 laps. Alan McNish, only 12 laps for Toyota.
Waiting for the right moment to send Räikkönen back on circuit. It's all looking fairly clear on the start-finish area at the moment. Button's just coming through turn 13 onto start-finish. He's actually being chased at the moment, interestingly enough, by his new teammate for next year, Jacques Villeneuve, in the BAR. Räikkönen's ready to come out, though. And he exits the McLaren pit. Of course, it's his second time to this Indianapolis track. He raced the Sauber here last year, but ironically ended up with contact with his teammate, Nick Heidfeld. There were 3 of them, him, Heidfeld and Trulli all tried to get into the first corner together, and they ended up making contact.
Well, they ought to have been able to do it, because the racetrack at that point is sufficiently wide, but the trouble is they all three wanted the precise same part of the racetrack. And you know, you think they've either got the wit or the intelligence to work it out that ain't going to happen.
No, so it was Raikkonen that lost out in that, and he was one of the first retirements of last year's race, so they'll be hoping that for better things. There is Villeneuve and Button and Trulli, so both Renaults out on track at the same time.
In terms of top speed, Juan Pablo Montoya now in that third sector, quickest of all. That's coming across the start-finish line, but of course the highest top speed are going to be recorded a little bit further down the track. That's just prior to the braking zones into that turn one.
It's pretty worrying in a way that they've all been pounding round and round now for a number of minutes, number of laps, and still nobody's beaten that time that Michael Schumacher did on his third flying lap. It's a bit of a worry for everybody, but it's nothing unusual. We've come used to that so far this season, the Ferrari being top league. Of course, Williams tend to run the cars heavy with a lot of fuel on the Friday, so they don't always show what they can do. Just think about how many times Montoya's had pole position this year. They could still very much be in the challenge for pole come tomorrow.
Well, I think Williams, as we know, pretty much do a lot of their race work in this first part of Friday running. They'll do a bit more, and they may let the car run down on fuel load. They may end up deciding which of the tyre choices is going to suit them better, and you might see a little bit more of an indication as to what Michelin and particularly Williams or McLaren are capable of when we come to the end of that next 1 hour session. What's interesting to me, and it's just confirming that they two performances of Jaguar in Belgium and in Italy was not a fluke. De La Rosa and Irvine third and fourth quickest respectively.
Yeah, another good effort, and we saw how their Friday pace was very much backed up in qualifying both in Spa and Monza. It's not as if they're just going for the headlines on the Saturday morning papers from Friday free practice. They really have got a good car underneath them now, much better at least than it was. The checkered flag is out on a slightly extended first session, extended because of the red flag that Rubens Barrichello caused by crashing at turn 13. But we shall see. I would imagine they will start the second session on time, which is some 40 minutes or so from now. So a 40-minute gap, and then they'll be back out for their second 1 hour session. Michael Schumacher therefore ends up the session fastest overall. Eddie Irvine just crossing the line, but he stays in fourth place. Kimi Raikkonen finishing off the lap as well, and Raikkonen now up to ninth position. Montoya makes his way back into the pits. Looks like a quick pit entry, perhaps a little bit of a simulation for the race itself.
Yeah, he's pretty quick through that pit lane. It's not that wide, and then you've got to suddenly get on the brakes and slow it down.
So you ready for a sit down?
On my way, Tony.
Stairs in the office.
So engineers will now go and analyse some of the data that they've picked up from this first session, see how it works out with the simulations that they had already gone through before they arrived at Indianapolis, and then make some changes perhaps to the setup. Fisichella just coming into the pits now. He's seen the checker flag, but he has just set the fastest mid-sector time. So we might have seen an improvement from Fisichella if the session hadn't ended there. Let's just see how the times stack up then at the end of the first session. Fisichella backing up the Bridgestone run from Michael Schumacher with a good run in the Jordan. But look at the two Jags right there. Fastest Michelin runners, De La Rosa and Eddie Irvine, ahead of Juan Pablo Montoya. Then another couple of Bridgestone users, the Jordan of Sato, the Sauber of Heidfeld, ahead of Button, Raikkonen and Coulthard. So both McLarens in the top 10, but not perhaps quite as far up as we might have expected. Then beyond the top 10, we've got Heinz-Harald Frentzen in a good strong 11th in his first run in the Sauber, of course, and having to adapt himself to this slightly difficult driving position. Mika Salo 12th, then Mark Webber a good 13th in the Minardi ahead of Villeneuve. Jarno Trulli only 15th in the end, and then Olivier Panis. Ralf Schumacher quite a long way down the list. He did 13 laps in that session. McNish 18th, Alex Young 19th, and then Barrichello 20th, and last, of course, he didn't actually set a time. That's why he's not on that list, because he crashed on his first flying lap, so he never actually got to set